Welcome to the AI GovSec discussion series. I'm Aditya Chotia, an AI governance and security enthusiast. I've spent 13 plus years in the cybersecurity, IT risk and compliance space. This series exists because AI is moving faster than the governance frameworks meant to control it. Every week, I sit down with industry leads, with CISO security leaders, and everybody is worried. Everybody doesn't know what's coming. Hence, I've created this to actually understand and see what everybody is doing, what's working, what's not working when it comes to AI, governance, and security. No theory, just practical conversations about how organizations are navigating the gap between AI adoption and the controls needed to manage it. Whether you are a security leader trying to get ahead of the AI risk or a practitioner building in this space, this is for you. Let's get into it. Thank you, Ira, for taking out time to join us in the AI GovSec discussion series. Really appreciate, because you are on the other side of the pond to us and from the audience. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name's Ira Winkler. I'm currently field CISO with a company called ISLE, which is actually based in San Francisco, but also in Prague. I also run the CruiseCon conference, and previously I started my career at NSA, went to government contractors, did a bunch of things there. I started a company, went to HP, or sold the company at HP, was chief security strategist there. Ended up starting another company, sold that. I became a CISO because I was never a CISO before, so I felt like I should get a role like that. And I was CISO for an MSP. And then I was recruited to be chief security architect at Walmart, and I was there for a while. And then now I'm the field CISO for a company called ISLE, which is in the application security space, with a lot of people who formed the company out of Google and Google DeepMind side, especially, and Anthropic. So very relevant to your discussion.
Yeah, I think your background sort of resonates very well with the audience we have, security leads and CISO. So I really appreciate you taking out time. So just jumping back into your background, and as you said, right, I know you started at NSA, and I think you have also done some of the espionage simulation with the special forces.
Mm-hmm.
And you have been CISO at the MSP, and you have been the chief security architect at Walmart. What's the thread across all of them? How does AI fit into all of that?
So if I would say there's a thread that I have, the thread I have is, frankly, I don't necessarily care about the underlying technology. Fundamentally, it's about protecting information. It's not about the technology. You obviously need to know the technology to do the job, but I think too many people are out there chasing the latest gadgets or whatever you want to call it. And I focus, again, what am I trying to accomplish? What are, when I'm on the vendor side, what are customers trying to accomplish? As an example, I'm not trying to go ahead and worry about the technology per se. I'm trying to worry about what's the actual mission. And, for that, I worry about the benefits, not the features. Because again, saying, oh, there's AI there. AI at best is a feature, but what does it deliver? Why do people care about AI or whatever? And so when you're talking about AI, I really, frankly, at the end of the day, AI is really just a separate set of well, at a high level, I mean, theoretically, by the definition, you could almost use one of those old calculators and call it AI. Because the broad definition of AI, you go to Wikipedia or dictionary.com. It's a computer that essentially, you might attribute human thought to. And complex math performed by a simple calculator could be considered that theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I look at it, more advanced applications, AI is a set of mathematical algorithms that are under broad definitions, because I hate the use of the term AI. Because AI means like computers. I'm going to do computers to do this. I'm going to use computers to do that. It's AI is like, so but more specifically, are you talking about agentic AI, generative AI? Are you talking about self-driving vehicles? Are you talking about optical character recognition? Are you talking about visual recognition, machine learning? All these disciplines within AI means something very different. And now the way those different functions are accomplished is with different mathematical algorithms. Now, traditionally, you have statistics, and statistics are essentially math. And that's how computers work. They work by math. And then you go ahead and you implementing AI. I'm trying to maintain a thread here as you
Mm,
asked it.
mm,
But AI is a different set of algorithms that are more robust, take into account more data. And it's really just programmers programming the latest algorithms with the latest data. Now, why this is different is, they can do fuzzier things. They can take into account more information. So, for example, I'll use the example of self-driving cars.
mm.
Self-driving cars, clearly you call them AI. And yes, maybe they mimic human action, human thought, and stuff like that. So, okay, good definition of AI. But in order to do that, you have to calculate what is something. You have to say, hey, is that a child on the road or one of those signs of a child that somebody puts out with a little flag that looks like a child? But is this is it a sign or is it a child that might run out in the road?
Mm.
Now, a self-driving vehicle has to make that determination. And they make that determination through a variety of machine learning, which takes in the visual image, sometimes possibly like some form of LiDAR, radar type of imaging, and says, okay, I have this thing out there. This thing forms an object, and this object is isolated from the other objects around it. Now, with that in mind, what is this object? Now, you can do a statistical program. A statistical program might say, with 89% accuracy, I think this is an actual child versus one of those stupid signs. With AI, it's kind of like it might, with machine learning, it might, for example, go down a decision tree type of thing, where a decision tree basically, it's like one of those old things, like if yes, then go to the right. If no, go to the left. Then that leads to another decision. If yes, we have a J48 decision tree algorithm. That is supervised machine learning, which is one type of artificial intelligence. It's a very specific algorithm. Now, using that compared to a statistical program that says this is the outline of a child with 89% accuracy, that makes something a statistical, makes something AI versus makes it a statistical determination. Now, do I care that this is categorized, a decision tree is categorized as AI? Or maybe they use cluster analysis, which is another form of AI. That's unsupervised machine learning. I don't care. I care whether or not it is a child or not. As an example.
Got it.
Now, too many technologists are like, okay, this algorithm does this and this and this. And I don't care if it's AI. At the end of the day, it's really computer programs that are making these decisions that you have to trust to make the decisions, much like computers spit out data, write checks. You're trusting the computer to come up and give people their salary checks and distribute the salary checks through direct deposit to banks and everything. It doesn't matter whether it's a payroll program or it's a program detecting whether or not there's a child that might run out in the road. It's a computer program.
And if I just summarize that, so I think what I heard there is the key thread is for somebody or CISO peers out there, the key thread is don't think about the tool or the features, think about the end goal or the business objectives or like what you want to achieve with that tooling is basically you should think about. And even with AI coming in, it's just a feature or it's a tool. And there's so many technicalities around the AI, like you mentioned, but I think ultimately what wins is you should care about the child, if I get that right.
Yeah, you should care about the child. Now, the fact is that algorithms that are under the AI umbrella will be more accurate theoretically. Now, people would say, because here's another distinction people need to understand.
Mhm.
Most of these algorithms have been around for decades. We just haven't been able to use them because they are very processor intensive. I mean, the math is highly complex. It requires a lot of recursions and stuff like that. So this is why NVIDIA is worth trillions of dollars these days, or whatever it's worth. At the same time, you also need access to data because we need lots of data sets to be able to determine what are the characteristics of a child and compare them to some sort of machine learning algorithm to say, hey, all these characteristics add up to a child who might come out in the road.
Hmm.
And so you need to have the processing capability to do this at a speed of 60 miles an hour, which means you'll have seconds to make a decision as to what the car should do. And this required lots and lots of faster processing than we previously had before to be able to run these algorithms, which are both complex and require a lot of recursions.
Got it. I think this actually adds a lot more color to the way people are getting scared that it's like a beast inside a box, what it can do. I think it is adding some real color and you're breaking actually down in layman terms, which is really helpful.
Yeah, because I think too many people are, oh, AI is this, AI is that. When I hear somebody talking like that, I know they know nothing about it, and it's very frustrating because at the end of the day, these are people who are out there like, you hear Mark Cuban, for example, who's a very intelligent person. I've seen him talk how AI is going to revolutionize things. It's like, well, okay, really what we really have is just faster computers running more advanced programs. Is AI more advanced programs and this is going to change things? It's essentially just the next generation of computing. It's not AI.
Yeah.
People start talking quantum this, quantum that. People were talking about the metaverse and blockchain. All of a sudden, nobody mentions that anymore.
And Meta actually switched off, I think, last week, their whole metaverse thingy. So, right, I think this is really helpful. And I think I missed to indicate this in your introduction that you have written 6 books. And one of the books which my team really found interesting was You Can Stop Stupid. And I think what we understood was that it was around behavioral cybersecurity that organizations can focus on they should focus on more stopping from a human error perspective, so stopping the damage from human error rather than just trying to fix the human.
Well, yeah, there's a combination of things there. I should say technically I would say 7 1/3 books.
Right.
I wrote 7 books, and then one of them, Security Awareness for Dummies, they took chapters out of that and put it into a cybersecurity all-in-one for dummies. So anyway, I think technically that's my best-selling book ever. So You Can Stop Stupid, going back to that, the issue is that everybody is looking at what I call or refer to as the proximity of the issue. Now, if a user clicks on a phishing message, everybody says, oh my God, what a stupid user. He needs better awareness. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what idiot gave the stupid user the phishing message in the first place? And so when people are looking at it, they're taking I took a lot of principles from safety science and also a little bit from, the same principles are frankly in accounting and everything else, because what you're looking at is you're looking to create a system that addresses the fact that an individual is a part of a system, and this individual can initiate loss by their actions. You could have computers initiating loss too. I mean, that's the whole thing. Everybody's worried about a lot with AI because they're afraid, oh my God, this AI is going to really screw things up and everything like that. If I trust the AI to drive, or I have, what's the latest thing? Or I have like these drones that are autonomous drones that are going to blow up innocent people. Like, all of a sudden that becomes the proximity. Now, the reality is the proximity is just one piece of the overall system. So, for example, I'll use phishing as the most common example where we think users need help. So everybody's like, oh my God, the user needs more awareness. Frankly, even though I wrote Security Awareness for Dummies, is one of the least useful in the chain. It's still necessary. Don't get me wrong, it's necessary, but it's still one of the least useful in the chain when you're talking about things, for example, like, hey, maybe we should stop botnets from existing, because some people all over the internet leave their computers vulnerable to be hacked, so botnets can exist. And then if we use DMARC or other technologies on the perimeter, we can lock out phishing messages from coming in. Then we have secure email gateways. And these secure email gateways contain AI technologies to weed out, potential phishing or harm malware or whatever. And then from there, it goes to the next spot, which is the computer system itself, the user environment. And in that case, the systems themselves should have anti-malware, they should have spam filters, they should have a variety of other software built into email as an example that stops it. And then if a user does click, there should be, hey, do you really want to ruin our network? And the user could say, yeah, I really want to ruin the network. And then you go, okay, that's fine. And then even though you have to expect there are malicious people out there, 3 to 5% of the population around the world are either sociopaths or psychopaths, and they will do harm if given the opportunity. Likewise, there will be error. So you have to address that. The problem isn't a user clicks on the message. The problem is that people design networks or systems that allow the user to ruin the entire organization if they click on a link, which you have to expect. So you have all these other technologies like data leak prevention, web content filters, anti-malware, access privileges, and things like that, that should control the blast radius. So when you have the user is the least of the problem in the whole chain. And what you can stop stupid addresses is the whole sequence of events that should be addressed.
I think what we were trying to say there, if I interpret that correctly, is so we can build systems around human stupidity to control the damage or prevent the damage. Similarly, we could build similar systems or some different systems around the AI world to again control or prevent the damage. Is that the right?
Yeah, at a high level, that's exactly the case. And what you do is you're limiting the privileges, you're limiting what they can do, you're limiting the access, you're determining whether or not they should have the access. Whatever you attribute to a human, you can attribute to any self-driving vehicle, a weapon, or whatever else there is to continuously verify, hey, here's all these actions. Let's limit the actions that they can theoretically be able to do, and let's limit the blast radius should these actions be harmful.
And I think there you also quoted, like, let's say, which I agree with, like, let's say 3 to 5% of the population is sort of malicious actors, right? What's going on with AI, and every day we do see incidents occurring. Do you think AI sort of elevates what these guys are capable of?
So the answer is yes and no. I just gave a presentation at RSA. It was almost buzzword bingo, as I joke. It was like applying the AI to the human element of cybersecurity, attack, and defense. Now, the thing is, AI, like I said, is embedded in all computing we've been doing. When I hear a company say, for example, we don't allow AI into our organization, and I'm sitting there like, if you have an iPhone, your people have Siri on it. Are you telling them to deactivate Siri, which is voice recognition with interpretation, and then generative AI to give you results? Are you doing that? No, they're not. Are they going ahead and saying, we are going to dumb down our anti-malware? Because anti-malware these days has machine learning built into it by default? Or are we going to go ahead and just turn off predictive text in Microsoft that was built into everything? Of course not. These people are idiots. I worry less about people who make mistakes than more people who are ignorant of the overall concepts. That to me is a bigger issue. Sorry.
I think we were just discussing, does AI elevates the whole 3 to 5%?
So going back to the point, the problem is, yes, to err is human, to really screw up is a computer. Because it does these screw ups at much faster velocity. AI can do things faster. You also have AI technologies that can impede this. One-way anti-malware works, as opposed to being signature-based, machine learning-based anti-malware, but they call it behavioral-based, is essentially going ahead and looking for actions that might cause harm. For example, they're much more capable of detecting, hey, why is this user doing really bad things? Why is this user operating at speeds faster than the user can, theoretically?
Mhm.
And so all of these technologies are able to go ahead and detect anomalies much quicker than if a human was involved. So yes, I saw some study that while it used to take 0-day vulnerabilities like months to be in the wild and be exploitable, now it could be hours. The reality is, in hours, you have proactive technologies that are looking for these attacks much more effectively and proactively as well. So it's a bit of an arms race. Yes, the bad guys have a little bit of an advantage, but the thing is, you can't rely upon single points of failure. When these things happen, it's not because some malicious AI has somehow beat your tools, or your warden tool. It's how, well, there was probably a cascading number of failures inside your organization that let an attack go through, because people are like saying, oh, defense in depth is outdated. I don't know who said that. They're morons if they say that. But the reality is that defense in depth should stop, a lot of damage, and also having AI technologies to detect and prevent this on the fly also helps. So it's both a benefit and a curse.
No, this resonates with me. And I think just following on from that, I think majority of the way I would say thesis of your career has been around that human behavior is sort of the weakest link in the whole security chain in the cybersecurity, if I'm not wrong. And what I, as a follow-up, like just adding that with now AI agents coming into the picture, and when AI agents making the decision on behalf of human, how does that thesis changes?
So in the first place, the weakest link is not the user. The weakest link are the developers that don't account for the errors. That's my
Mhm.
opinion, because it is part of a chain. And frankly, let me ask you, and this is an important point. Is the weakest link the user who clicks on the message, or is the weakest link the lack of DMARC to prevent it from coming in? Or is it the secure email gateway that says, hey, this is okay, pass it on to the user?
I think it's the weakest link. Agreed.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole system, there is no weakest link. For a user to fail, there had to be at least 5 technology failures for the user to fail. So
Mhm.
I want to make sure that's clear. But, to say, okay, well, if we have AI there, I mean, yeah, to a large extent, like the technology replacing human actions can go ahead and, in some cases, I say put guardrails around the users.
Mhm. Mhm.
It stops them from doing things they shouldn't have the capability to do in some cases. Can it implement process better? And process should have automatic security built in.
Mhm.
I was asked this morning to comment on deep fake technologies. And to me, there's the infamous deep fake attack where this company, Arup, which is a primarily UK-based consulting firm, had some accounting person in Asia contacted supposedly by the CFO via a video call. And the supposed CFO on the video call told him to make a $25 million transaction.
Right.
And so everybody's like, okay, do you blame the person? I'm like, you know what? You got to give the bad guy some credit every so often. That's a new one.
Hmm. That's a
But the
very
reality is, okay, however, you have to come back to, were there processes in place that says, even if I tell you to send money, this has to be documented through some capability. Like, for example, clearly they were not talking to the real CFO. They should have sent the email to, somebody should have said, okay, here's what I want to do. I need you to confirm in writing, for example,
Hmm.
via email at least, that you are authorizing this transaction. And there should at least be some form of paper trail, which there are in just about all other cases. Now, if there were no policies like that, then that's on the CFO, frankly, because there should have been traces of, it is a unique attack. There probably was no awareness. There probably was no knowledge that even if you're talking to somebody who appears to be exactly a person you think is your boss's boss's boss, that could be a fake. There should have still been in place processes that say to release $25 million, here it is. It's like, okay, maybe you say, look, I'm the CFO, I'm ordering you to. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I know you're not committing fraud and you're going to stick it on me? So I'm going to send you an email message to say, you have instructed me to send this money to do this. Please reply back to this email saying, yes, this is the case.
I think what you're saying completely shifts the mind that it's the system around the human, or the multiple layers of control, the culture of the organization, the training, all of that is the same, I would say, culprit rather than the human itself, because everybody just blames the human.
I mean, at the end of the day, a good business doesn't rely. A person performs a function. Maybe the function involves making a decision,
Hmm.
but a good business has systems for every possible thing that's done. And so the larger the business, ideally, there should be more systems in place. There's a difference, for example, so I don't know if you have this expression, but a mom and pop shop,
Hmm.
down the street that might go ahead and, like a souvenir store where it's like, okay, should I accept this check? And, compared to taking a credit card transaction or something. But, you still, but it's like, okay, in a mom and pop store, I get it.
Hmm.
But if you're a large company, there should be an established process. Do I accept a check or not? If I accept a check or not, here's how the process is and so on. And I need to have a magnetic strip reader. I need to go ahead and have verification. There has to be a limit on it, et cetera. I need to write down the driver's license, and the driver's license has to match the name on the credit card, et cetera. And so you would expect processes like that in like a large department store compared to a mom and pop souvenir shop. So I don't know, where are you based physically?
In the UK, London.
Okay, so yeah, I go to Harrogate and walk down the streets in Harrogate. Sorry, I don't know if that's a good example for
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
but
no, it is.
I walk down the streets in Harrogate, walk into the little stores, that's different. If I walk into Harrods in London and say, hey, I want to pay with a check, Harrods in London damn well better be able to know how to process a check.
Hmm.
Or if they don't, that's fine too, but there should be an established process.
Yeah, yeah. They should be established, but I think I get the gist. And this is a really helpful example because it shifts the mind. And just on the back of that, and maybe we touched upon this slightly, and I think when you were at Walmart, you were leading like a forward-leaning research around the behavioral cybersecurity.
Mhm.
And if if you would be that today, given what has been come on with AI in that role and everything, what would the research agenda would look like, and how different will it be, if at all different?
I don't necessarily think it would be different. Like I said, it'd be different tools. I mean, I was looking at things like wellness of employees because you're dealing with a lot of people who are under stress. I can't comment on Walmart's cybersecurity program, but if you have a large cybersecurity program, you have to assume it's a bit stressful. So I was
Mm.
working on some of the stress, was working with the awareness team, which was outstanding there, doing some research on how to make it more effective. I can't talk about it too much, but I'll leave it there.
I think one question on the back of it, because even in the UK and Europe, I think what we have seen and what I have seen personally is generally the retail organization security teams are much more stretched and much more stressed, even more than the financial services. And I don't know why, like why retail is the most where security programs. Do you have any take on that?
So I think if I'm going to look at things from a philosophical perspective, the largest programs in the world are like, largest programs per capita. I don't know if that's a good way to phrase this, but banks in the financial sector, you're talking, I could talk about them since I never worked for them, but you're looking at people like JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, US
Mhm.
Bank, Morgan Stanley. These are organizations that have, I mean, they realize what they transact is essentially money. They are dealing right now, money does not exist anymore in theory.
Mhm.
Money is basically a bunch of bits flying around from one bit storage to another bit storage. I'm not even talking Bitcoin. I'm
Mhm.
talking hard cash.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I make a transaction, I haven't handled cash except a tip on a cruise or something in a long time.
Mhm.
I go ahead and my cell phone, like I get paid via EFT. I get paid via direct deposit. I spend my money on my cell phone by transacting things over a computer. And I just say, hey, let me buy this or that. I go
Mhm.
into the store, I use my Apple Pay to pay whatever. I don't have cash. I don't need cash. It's all bits. Now, the infrastructure of this is clearly there's banks, even banks are closing down a lot of their branches. And even then, they don't have as much cash as they used to. Again, you walk in and it might be an electronic transaction that you're doing. So, by definition, everything the bank does involves pretty much electronic computer based actions.
Mhm.
Luckily, the smart ones realize that and put all the resources they need into doing it securely. But retail is very much cost sensitive. With retail, Walmart is famous for having, save money, live better. They make a very low margin on their transactions. And they have immense need to like have supply chain security and all that sort of stuff. But internally, they have to keep costs low. Even Amazon, which I think now technically has larger sales than Walmart at this point. I saw something like a month ago.
Mhm.
A lot of their efforts is going into transmitting goods from one place to another, physical goods. That's a supply chain issue. Now, Amazon has large portions of their company which are clearly electronics, such as AWS and things. But when you're talking about Walmart, you're talking about Target, you're talking about all these other companies, they are very much more cost sensitive for an organization that is very much brick and mortar compared to financial organizations, which is very much bits.
Mhm. Got it. And I think that's why the retail are sort of always targeted more, maybe, and it's more stressed and stretched
Mhm.
programs. Got it. I think one of the things which the research team has found is I think you also sit on the board of Gilead Capital Partners, if that's the right way to
A
pronounce it.
lot, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you are already advising or you are seeing a lot of AI security or cybersecurity startups popping up.
Mhm.
I think from your perspective, what does this whole space looks like in terms of what's getting overfunded, what's getting underfunded, what gap is right now in the market which nobody's looking at, if there is any?
I'll be upfront with you. I'm not really a great judge of that. I'm very skeptical of everything I see. We are seeing different CISOs, different organizations have different pain points. We are looking at, frankly, a lot of people looking at, and God, I have to use Dr. Evil quotes just so I don't throw up in my mouth when I say it, but we are using AI
Mhm.
in many cases to augment people. We're to reduce the number of people required to do it a lot because in many cases, we don't have the people. No, I don't buy into the cybersecurity skills shortage. It's not like we don't have enough people to do it. We just don't have people, companies with the budget to hire more people. And in order to account for this, there's a lot of effort to use, technology to supplement or replace people, as an example.
Mhm.
So I think it can be more effective because, for example, I used to hire SOC analysts when I was the CISO for an MSP,
Mhm.
and we'd have to hire all these level 3 or level 1 SOC analysts. And now there's a lot of software that can help triage the work really well. And so before, when maybe you needed 2 or 3 people to sit on a SOC 24/7, maybe you only need one person 24/7 while the AI can help filter out a lot of the crap that's there.
I think what the pain area you were highlighting, I know that a lot of consulting companies and even these sort of MSPs, very niche MSPs, they actually, it's like a service they provide, right? They run the SOC operations for Fortune thousands and FTSE hundreds and makes a
Mhm.
lot of money. And I think AI solves that problem. From your perspective, especially, so I got one of this use case, and I know there are a lot of very good AI security startups which are popping up as an AI SOC agent and all in that arena. Do you think Are there any use cases which still some of the founders may are not looking at, which can be solving some of the pain areas?
So I think a lot of people are not really focused on making users more efficient at their work. Maybe companies are doing something, but building in cybersecurity to a certain extent to help, almost be a co-pilot type application for users to be that way. Previously, like for example, maybe I'm dating myself, but there used to be Microsoft Site Advisor as an example. I don't know. It was essentially a plugin you'd put into your web browser. And when you went to a malicious or questionable site, Site Advisor would say, hey, that's probably a bad idea to go there. Now, I think we're getting a little bit better with some of the browser security tools that are out there. But I see a little bit of that. Maybe we could do a little bit better. I mean, fundamentally, what happens is, I hope, what happens is usually somebody's sitting there saying, this is a real bad pain, and I need somebody to solve this. And it's like these bottom-up type of approach that really is necessary. And so where somebody says, I need a tool that does this, and hopefully you find the right entrepreneur with the right experience to actually build it. Then there's other types of AI I think we also need, because there's lots of, God, I keep saying AI. There's lots of AI built into tools that help solve a technology problem. There's not a lot of it to help support the CISO making strategic decisions. People don't realize other disciplines are essentially involving data science to go ahead and help them make decisions. So, for example, a CFO has teams of people to optimize every financial aspect of what they're doing. COOs, I don't know if the term still exists, but there used to be a whole field called operations research that would look at how operations of an organization like supply chain and everything else were handled. And there'd be people who specialize in operations research to mathematically model the operations of an organization and figure out how to streamline it. How can we make it better? I use the example of a truck driver. A truck driver has to make deliveries. And the deliveries tell the truck driver, okay, I have to go here, here, and here. Now, before technology, a truck driver would have to look at a map and say, okay, well, I think I'm going to go here. Now we have these tools that can map out the route that a truck should go to be most effective, save gas, most efficient time-wise, most efficient maybe building in requirements that when I worked fast food, you don't want to take deliveries at the height of breakfast or at the height of lunch. You want to wait till like 2 to 4 in the afternoon when you have a slow period. So all the software can go ahead and do it, where you're not relying upon a person to make these models. Now, the reason I'm an analogy person. Now, think of that for a CISO. Who's helping the CISO make a decision? The CISO essentially is out there saying, they're hired for their gut feels. I remember I'd be sitting in budget meetings and we'd be arguing, well, we have some money left over. And then, the deputies would come in and be like, okay, so what do we want to spend it on? And people would make their case for each of the things. And it's like, vote on it, which really makes sense. Take your own pride. Don't say you have a stake in it. And what we were doing is we're going by our gut. The reality is there should be data science behind it to tell us which was the most effective thing to do, not what sounded better because the person made a better case or we didn't have the right data and so on. So there should be data science supporting the CISO. And fundamentally, AI is data science.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think this is a really, really good case because the AI can learn from the organization data. And for that here, what is important to you? What is non-negotiable? It can flash up where the CISO can, this is what we need to do.
Right. And the CISOs don't come from a business background, don't understand the concept of operations research, don't understand all the mathematical disciplines that have been put forth to do that. And they need to learn this, and possibly, hopefully, vendors can have tools to help CISOs model and make better financial, operational, monetary decisions within their own group. Because I would want to know, for example, I would love a mathematical model. Like I worked when I was the CISO for an MSP, I worked for a genius of a CIO, Chris Schaefer. Anyway, he programmed Splunk himself to go ahead and put out Splunk Business Intelligence, and he was creating models of utilization of each of the employees. And so we could take a look and understand where we might need a new employee. What's the utilization? If we have utilization of people that's averaging 60%, what? If I have 5 people with a 60% utilization, and let's say I want maximum is 80% utilization, I don't need to hire another person until utilization goes up among those 5 people up to 80%. And I was able to make good scientific-based decisions based upon the data models that the CIO put in place. Now, that aside, most CISOs don't have that level of detail. Most CISOs don't have, okay, what is the burden I have on a SOC analyst, for example? What's the burden I have on my program? It's like I go, they're like, oh, gee, I'm overworked. Okay, maybe I can hire somebody when the backlog gets bad enough. But they should be able to make a dollar figure like, hey, I could turn around the evaluation of systems to go live 30% faster if I get 2 more people.
Yeah.
And data science teams can do that for them. Hopefully a tool they can get. But this is a side issue that I think a lot of people need to understand too.
Keep going. This is all diamond and gold. So
yeah, so there's a concept, there are positions known as a chief data officer. And the way I know if an organization is serious about artificial intelligence is whether or not there's a chief data officer. And the reason I say this is everybody thinks a data officer, what do they do? I know what they should do. A chief data officer should be able to catalog the data that's in an organization and also make sure that the data is accessible consistently with the right APIs so that all these systems can do it. Because if you're going to do AI, the way you do AI is you need data access, and to be able to pull data as necessary, you could have all the computing in the world, but if the data is not accessible, you really can't do much with it. You can't optimize functions if you don't have full visibility into the organization's data. You look at, okay, can I get access to payroll data? Because payroll tells me what things cost, what's the average salary? Can I get access to supply chain issues and backlog and be able to pull it consistently into my AI models and be able to go ahead and analyze? And without the functionality of a chief data officer, whether or not one exists, you're not going to be able to have that. Because again, for AI, you need processing capability, you need data.
Yeah.
The data can be there, but if you can't access it into your models, because another aspect of AI, actually I have a patent on machine learning applications to tell which users are highly susceptible to phishing or not, based on psychological tests. And the way this worked was I was able to, into a single model, pull together multiple tests. Because it wasn't one thing saying this user is vulnerable. It was a combination of factors saying a user was vulnerable. And I needed to bring in data from multiple tests. And that AI algorithms are able to take, they just consider an attribute. If you bring it into the mathematical model, it doesn't matter whether it came from the big 5 personality test or the locus of control or the 5-factor narcissism index or whatever. I could put any attribute from any of the tests into a machine learning algorithm, in this case, a cluster analysis, and treat it just like it's a single source of data and come out with more information than I would have if I just was able to analyze one piece of data at a time.
So I think it's a tooling problem, but then it's also a bigger data problem, because once you solve the data problem, then only you can deploy the nice, great AI tools on the top of it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to deploy you have to be able to access as much data as possible or you're missing something.
Mm,
So, for example, I mentioned the truck driver issue.
yeah.
I could look at a map and say, okay, I just have access to a map. Now, the map might not have real-time traffic information. So if there's not real-time traffic information, is that going to be the most optimized route?
Mm,
No, you would not know, because a smart algorithm like, I think you have Waze in Europe, but you have Waze.
mm.
Waze navigates you around traffic to make a more efficient route that you would never otherwise find on your own. That's what truck drivers need. However, if they have the maps, it could tell you, here's the way you would drive the fastest compared to highway or city streets. But if you don't have the moment by moment traffic, you're not going to know when a traffic jam occurs or they shut down a road. You
Mm,
could be stuck in traffic the entire day. Or let's say, for example, a tree falls down across the street and the whole road is blocked. All of a sudden, if you don't have access to that information, you're going to be going to a dead end and nobody's going to tell you because you don't have access to that piece of data.
no, I think this resonates very well, and I completely get the importance of data to solve the pain problem. And just on the backside of it, I think here in the Europe, we are seeing a lot of these shadow AI problem solvers popping up. And I don't know if these are in your brain, do you classify them as like a feature versus a startup product? Because many startups are just getting born out just for the fact that they can add light into the blind spots of shadow AI. And are you seeing any noise in this area of shadow AI and discovery of AI tools?
Well, there are vendors who are out there who are attempting to detect
Hmm,
what AI agents are out there and what data is being accessed by them. What are they doing and stuff? So there are vendors theoretically in the space. How good they are, some are probably better than others, but I saw a bunch of them, but I'm terrible with names and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know they exist.
And I think in the Europe, they're like a big thing, like everybody's worried about because the EU AI Act and the soft.
Yeah, but you have GDPR and on top of the AI Act, a lot of these things are gonna, if the developers are not aware of the privacy implications, they could get in serious trouble for them.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's another thing. I wish people would stop saying AI is calculating math.
Hmm,
What people have to consider is the design of the programs. It's not the AI, it's who's designing the programs. What is the input? Should they be accessing the input that's there? And then there's the output. And the thing that AI, like I mentioned,
hmm,
Cambridge Analytica is a UK problem. So you have Cambridge Analytica. Now, Cambridge Analytica was using AI,
hmm,
and they were brilliant at what they did. They were just using data they didn't theoretically have permission to use. However, the data itself was indicating every possible thing about a person. In this case, I will keep my political leanings aside, but I do have to give Jared Kushner credit, Donald Trump's son, because I think he's the one that brought Cambridge Analytica in,
hmm,
because he realized that Facebook and all this data that's available was able to determine people like, for example, during the 2016 election, they were able to say, look, here are people who are Hillary voters. These are people who would never in their lifetime vote for Donald Trump. However, if we can just give them enough crap on Hillary Clinton so they're less likely to show up to vote for Hillary, because we're not trying to get them to vote for Trump, that would be a waste of
hmm,
time. If we could just keep them away,
yeah.
we could get a whole bunch more votes, or we could potentially win by doing that, which was the right thing, because Donald Trump in that case won 3 states by minuscule margins. Here's more crap about Hillary and just putting that in their Facebook feeds on a regular basis, pounding them. It's like, do I really want to get out and vote and stand in lines or whatever? I don't like Trump, but I like Hillary, but I don't like her enough.
Hmm,
All these things were used in these minuscule cases. And so the case is the data is always there to find things out. Now, what do? Like there, you turn switching to another topic that's related is, like there are articles about TikTok where they were able to determine if women were bisexual. And do they know a woman was bisexual or not? No. They just started feeding people videos and then going down the rabbit hole saying, well, you like these videos are similar based on cluster analysis. And so you're fitting a cluster that fits this, then a little bit more from machine learning. Okay, your cluster is now this. Okay, you're a little bit nudging towards this, because they would keep people feeding more and more. And to the point where it's like, okay, you kind of like this, so I'll give you more of that. Okay, you kind of like this, so I'll give you more. And it goes down that way. And this is like the same thing where Target, I don't think you have Targets in the UK, but Target's a very large retailer like Walmart.
Yeah.
And the case where this man walked into a Target store furious because his teenage daughter was receiving advertisements for pregnancy clothes from Target. And what happened was, did Target know she was pregnant? The answer is no. What Target did was they had data mining applications, clustering applications that said, this woman is buying this. And now we know from clustering, she's buying a sequence of things that in 3 to 6 months, she's going to be buying another cluster of things. So what they do is they start proactively feeding you advertisements for what the next cluster of things were. And by having your shopper information, why are you sending my daughter this? It's like they walked in, they don't know. The people in the store don't know. The people programming the data don't know. They just know that there's the SKUs on the tags match this number and they'll should want that number. And so the question is, the information is theoretically there, and the algorithms are able to pull out patterns that would not otherwise be able to pull out. Now, is the problem is the access to data? No. Is the problem the results of the data? No. The problem that people have to be concerned with are what are you doing with the data? Is it appropriate, for example, to send a woman who's pregnant ads for pregnancy clothes? Are you making implications because you know more about the person than the person might know?
Understand. But isn't this more of a cultural and ethics in that zone from a more target example perspective rather than, because it goes out of the securities arena? Do you think the CISOs can still do something here to make it?
Do I think the CISOs can do something here? The answer is no, it's not their job. The job of the CISO, whether you like it or not, and whether it's simple, is to protect information. Now, should the CISO be involved in conversations about these things? The answer is probably. But the security department is not responsible for the use of the data. Lawyers, HR, well, for HR applications, that's one thing, but more the legal and executive teams that need to say, hey, what are we doing with data mining? And we could be doing a lot of things. How much is theoretically ethical? How much can we get away with? The reality is, there are things that people have to be aware of, that AI isn't magic, but AI is able to pull out patterns of things that would not otherwise be noticed. Not otherwise be discovered, but noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make sense. I think your thesis is around that the cybersecurity bachelor's degree is not a very good idea. I think your thought process is around cybersecurity is a discipline within other fields. Like it's a discipline within other fields itself.
At a high level, the answer is yes, because I think that too much pressure is being put on cybersecurity teams for things that really should be done within the other teams. So again, I'm an analogy person. So a safe driver, do I think that every car should have a security car riding around the driver of another car? And the answer is no. We have drivers who are responsible for knowing to put on their seatbelt. The drivers are responsible for knowing and obeying the rules of the road, not to be careless, not to be drunk, to stay on the right side of the lines and things like that. And so there's a lot of security function built into driving. There's a lot of security function built into accounting, as an example. Now, the question is, should a security team, like, we need developers to understand basic cybersecurity principles. And it would be great if we give the application security tools, as an example, to the developers, so that who should oversee that software is secure and monitor the security of software, but they should make sure that the developers are giving them software that's secure as possible before it's considered for deployment. And that should be built in. System administrators should be building in basic security protocols into how they maintain systems. It shouldn't just be a systems administrator keeps the system up and running, and then they rely on the cybersecurity team to secure it. I mean, now clearly, vulnerability management and tracking systems to make sure they're kept up to date is fine. But theoretically, system administrators should be maintaining their systems securely, setting up secure configurations, implementing secure configurations, monitoring their users, ensuring that the appropriate parameters for passwords, multi-factor authentication are implemented. The cybersecurity team should set the protocols that everybody's supposed to implement. But again, it should be built into the jobs of people who are on the front lines, and the cybersecurity team should be able to oversee. They should have the experience of the system administrators before they join the security team, so they know what to secure, how to secure, step in when required, and so on. But it should be that of a consultative role as opposed to a hands-on role.
I think after you talk it through, it really makes sense and really resonates. And I'm thinking in my brain, why don't everybody think like this? Because this is the right way when you're talking it through.
Anyway, I don't know. I mean, I'm just sitting. I like to make things simple. I think there's an Albert Einstein quote that goes something to the effect that any competent fool can make something sound difficult. It takes a genius to make it sound simple. I never thought of it that way until I read the quote. But yeah, I hate things that are too complicated. I just don't have the attention span for it. And I just try to say, okay, what do I fundamentally need to know to do this? And, again, I've been an administrator. I can joke like, it's almost a joke, but the whole concept of cybersecurity degrees are offensive to me. And so I'm looking at it like, gee, okay, what do we do in this case? I think like too many people are focused on, gee, cybersecurity is a specialty. I'm like, no, cybersecurity it's a basic function, like being a chef washing their hands. You don't have to be a safety science expert to know a chef who's going to cook food should wash their hands.
Yeah.
You have monitors to make sure it happens, because you do need enforcement. But without the people washing their hands, it's sort of like you won't have, otherwise you need doctors 24/7. Or in this case, in the insanity in the US, now we need more people treating measles, which should have been gone.
No, it does make sense. Final section of the podcast, last two questions. I think the second last question is a question left by the previous guest, who was a CISO of a Canadian software company. So his question was, like 3 years ago, I think from his perspective, he said that AI was always there. The models, GPT model, were always there. But I think in the last 5 years or so, first the Gen AI or the Chat GPT, the Claude, they came out, and people got really, really sort of taken away by them. And then last year or so, the AI agents have come in, which is built on top of those models, and they can do actions along with the generative AI. Next in this whole space. So what's next can AI do? Like what's next can come out?
This is almost Skynet territory, but agents building agents. I mean, because you have to take things like I would love, and I think you can do this now with OpenClaw, maybe.
Yeah.
So, for example, I would just love to tell generative AI, here's what I need OpenClaw to do. I fly a lot. I need OpenClaw to truly understand my flight preferences and book my flight tickets, because it can take me a long time to do it. When I make reservations to go somewhere, especially let's say a common destination, like I went to RSA last week, in order to make those flight reservations, I like to leave. I don't like leaving too early, but I don't like getting in like after 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I want to get there mid-afternoon latest. So I want to ride mid-afternoon latest, ideally not waking up too early. But I also want to choose flights where I have the highest probability of getting free upgrades as a Delta Diamond member. And I need you to book me on Delta or a Delta partner, ideally. Now, I need you to go through and figure out which routing is more than likely, given the current number of seats available in first class, which routing is going to give me the best likelihood of being upgraded compared to the rest. Now, just for example, I could tell you that, like I know intuitively that if I go through Atlanta, where there are 5 or 6 flights a day between, or even more, between Atlanta and San Francisco, like I'd fly from my Baltimore airport to Atlanta, those flights are always filled from, even though I can get upgraded from BWI to Atlanta, the flights from Atlanta to San Francisco are going to be almost sold out in first class, because they like the lay flat seats a lot of them have. So that's going to be more difficult. So going through Detroit or Minneapolis or Salt Lake City, as an example, as a connecting airline, are going to be better. Now, people would say, why don't you fly direct? I have my miles. I have my priority on Delta. So anyway, if I could have an agent that builds all that in and takes care of, like, okay, what are the hotel reservations? Where am I going to go ahead and be set? Where can I get free breakfast or something, and things like that. But it would be nice to have that sort of program itself. Now, the issue is you might have agents who are sitting around saying, okay, I need more information, so I'm going to create another agent that I need to do something. That's where you get into Skynet territory.
Okay. Yeah.
That's where all of a sudden you have almost the hallucinations of generative AI. And like with generative AI, I asked it to help with my doctoral dissertation research. And basically I said, hey, can you pull up studies that are related to this subject? And I found a good study. Then I went to follow the link, and the DOI.org link, which is like the link to research articles, went to some other article. And then I actually knew the person it referenced as one of the authors. So I contacted her. She's actually working, I can't remember which one. It's like one of the London-based universities. I said, hey, did you write a paper on the title this? She's like, no, but it would be a really good paper. So not only did it create a title and an abstract and even a fake link, it found the authors that were the right authors who theoretically could do a paper like this. Now, that was really creative, except for the fact the paper not existing. And so, so it can help with research. So something like that, imagine where an agent writes an agent. Because theoretically, somebody should be able to reverse engineer, because computers are computers. There should be the logic step-by-step displayed when you were debugging normal programs. I'm dating myself saying C, but when you're saying, I'm going to program C, I could at least step-by-step through debugging tools to say, where is my program failing? We don't have that ability with Gen AI, which we should theoretically. And what happens when an agent says, hey, I need a function to do this. Ira wants this. We need to write a new computer program to go ahead and look at utilizations of different connecting flights from going on to San Francisco. That's a fairly straightforward application that shouldn't create too much harm. But what happens if it gets involved in hospitality, safety, medical type of applications and stuff like that?
Maybe at that point we'll get into AGI, isn't it?
Yeah.
This writing the agent. So probably, yeah. No, I'm really mesmerized by the thought process. I think you have like a solid vision, and I think that's going to happen like in the next 6 months or so. Somebody will build this. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
I think two last things. So now it's your turn to leave a question for the next guest. So I'll give the opportunity to you to ask the question, and then I've got one last question.
I'm just going to defer that. That's one of those things I can't even think about what to think about. I need an agentic AI to think that one through, but I don't have it.
I think my final question is, because I think you have so much of gold experience. If you're sitting across to a CISO, what are the two things you're going to tell him he can watch out for the next, let's say, 18 months or so? Like two things at the top of his agenda.
So fundamentally, this all comes down to people are worried about the more advanced things. They got to worry about the basics. I see too many people who are trying to be too much forward thinking and leaving behind the basics. You need to focus on basic, good cyber hygiene. Make sure that is running. And then simultaneously, you got to not look at cybersecurity because too many people are focused on the threats, I think. And not enough CISOs aren't really focused on what is the business actually doing. I would tell the CISO, look at what the business is doing forward thinking, because what's going to happen is somebody somewhere is going to start. You're talking about shadow AI as an example. That's an example of the business creating a problem that you're not looking out for.
Right.
And you need to look out for what is going on in the business that might impact cybersecurity or might impact your job. And if you start seeing a bunch of shadow AI, you start seeing a bunch of people writing applications, looking at data they shouldn't be looking at, or coming up with conclusions that could be sensitive, or bringing in new tools like robotics or whatever, that's where you need to be looking, because too many CISOs are out there with this, like, what keeps you up at night thinking some mythical entity or being is going to come down and swoop in. You already have, there's too many people are focused on the malicious problems than the malignant problems. Malicious problem is the hackers. This problem is some bad actor is going to have, like, some AI is going to take over the world. A malignant problem is vulnerabilities that just aren't patched, or somebody updating a system that puts an old vulnerability back or something like that. Likewise, malignant problems are users just doing things unintentionally. And in some cases, that includes bringing in shadow AI, bringing in functions like new technologies that you're not tracking. And you need to worry about the malignant things, not the malicious things, because too many CISOs are typing up the malicious and ignoring the malignant. It's the malignant that causes infinitely more damage and is much more of an imminent threat than any, like now it's like, I got to worry about Iran hacking everybody. Like, okay, Iran was already hacking people, but, maybe it's a little bit more intense, but, Iran's a little bit more capable. But if Iran's going to hack you, you already have 100 other people hacking you.
Yeah.
Maybe they're a little bit more capable, but if Iran's hacking you, the Russians are probably already hacking you. The Chinese are probably already hacking you. Iran just might be a little bit more malicious when they get in than they have been in the past. But you should still be protecting against it. But your users are infinitely more of a problem than Iran will ever be.
I think this is really well put, that don't worry about, as you said, the malicious, but it's more about the malignant.
Yeah.
Aligned with it. So this brings us to the end of the podcast. Thanks a lot, Ira, for your time. Everything has been real gold, 24 karat, and even I was mesmerized by the insights. So really helpful. Thank you.